Chauvin now also facing that third-degree murder charge reinstituted this week after the appellate court weighed in. Joining me now to discuss this case, criminal defense attorney Vic Bajaj and former senior homicide prosecutor, now criminal defense attorney Bernarda. Villalona, good to see both of you. Vic, to you, when you look at this case, and we just saw Julia's piece kind of reminding us of how we got here, how is this going to turn? What's the most important component here for both sides when they present their case to the jury, which eventually will be seated?
It's going to be hard facts, and that would be the forensics, what the medical examiner and what the state will call as their impeaching witness to the medical examiner's initial results and reports and findings. What was the cause of death for George Floyd? Was it Officer Chauvin who prevented him from breathing perhaps for too long? Or was it a polynarcotic cocktail that was within George Floyd's system, which we now know caused a depreciation and eventual failure of both his pulmonary and cardiovascular system? Now, that's what the jurors will end up talking about, and the proof will center around that issue. But as we walk through jury selection, or voir dire now, we can see the elephant in the room is really race and race relations and how people interpret police officers' interactions with themselves and their loved ones. So while this is extraordinarily important in jury selection, perhaps the most important thing is to get around this elephant in the room to see how people truly feel about race relations vis-a-vis law enforcement. At the end of the day, the most important fact, in my opinion, will be the forensics provided by the medical examiner and any impeaching evidence, and that presented by the defense.
Bernarda, you also have that video, and we've seen juror after juror come in and say, yeah, I've seen the video, and some are more honest, in my opinion, than others in terms of wanting to get on this jury, so they're saying what they think will get them on. But they've all had reactions to it, and the cause of death is going to be huge, as Vic said. But what about that video? How should the defense handle this video if they want to try to get Chauvin out? Because, you know, the point's been made. You watch the video and you're like, whoa, something went wrong there. I mean, but Vic's right, isn't he? The cause of death could be even more pivotal than that video.
So, Ted, regardless of the video, the first issue that both sides have to conquer is the cause of death. What was the cause of death? Because regardless whether it's murder in the second degree, murder in the third degree, or manslaughter, if you cannot prove the manner and cause of death, the manner to be homicide, then you cannot be found guilty of any of those homicidal acts. The second key issue that both sides are going to have to conquer is that of the mental state, because each of the three crimes has a certain mental state. And this is where the video plays a key role, because when you're trying to determine what was Chauvin thinking when he put his knee on the neck of George Floyd, that is what's going to determine his acts, or going to determine his mental state, and that's what you're going to argue to the jury. What the defense is going to have to do in this case is focus, and harp in that what Chauvin was doing was following police protocol, especially that key photo that they have of the certain training where you do see a person on top of the neck of another person doing the training. That's going to be huge in this case for the defense.
Absolutely. And also, Vic, getting jurors past it saying, yeah, if we had video of every police encounter with people that are resisting arrest, you'd see some crazy things, because frankly, without this video, this case never goes to trial. If these were just reports written and then the toxicology came back, no way this charges are filed, correct?
Well, maybe not. I mean, it really depends on what the forensic evaluation would have still been by the medical examiner without the benefit of the video. We don't know what that is. We don't have a crystal ball to find out what that conclusion may have been. But this is exactly what we see throughout the State of the Union here in the United States of America. We have a lot of body-worn camera funding issues going on through many prosecutorial agencies and law enforcement agencies throughout our fine union. And the reason for that is both to maintain the sanctity of law enforcement and to prevent from wrongful accusations of discriminatory practices and enforcement, But on the other side, it's also to make sure that the officers are held in check, so to speak, to make sure that they're acting appropriately. On balance, since body-worn cameras have been initiated en masse since, let's just say, 2014 and 15, with the number of contracts being reached with local law enforcement agencies, we have really seen a decrease in allegations of discriminatory practices against law enforcement. So it works both ways, but this is exactly the reason why body-worn camera and a recordation of the interaction with individuals is so very important. And it's something that we're going to see continuing to happen as we ride the tide towards recordation and having more of surveillance, let's say, and hardcore recordings of the interactions between citizens, non-citizens, and law enforcement, of course.
Bernarda, the courthouse is fortified. Every juror that's come in has acknowledged the magnitude of this case. Every juror lives in Hennepin County, meaning they lived through what happened with George Floyd and the aftermath. How does the pressure of a high-profile case like this affect a jury? And does it help prosecutors because there's pressure to come back with a guilty verdict? Or do you think that through this voir dire process and that our system can handle such a high-profile case and ensure that both sides do get a fair trial?
So with a case of this magnitude, there's definitely a lot of pressure on the prosecution because this is not just a case that people know in Minnesota. It is a case that we all know around the country, around the nation, and internationally. So there is pressure. All eyes are on Hennepin County, on that courthouse, to see what is going to happen with Derek Chauvin. And that's why it is so important that this case be televised, because in order for any community or for anyone to accept or be able to acknowledge the verdict, whether it's an acquittal or whether he's found guilty or determining which of the counts he's found guilty, transparency, and the world needs to see how this case transpired. So in regards to jury selection, that is why the jury selection in this case is so detailed. I mean, each potential juror filled out a questionnaire that was 14 to 16 pages. And you can also see that the potential jurors are being questioned at least for an hour or two, each one individually. So I give kudos to Hennepin County for the way that they're handling jury selection in a case of this magnitude, because this is the fairest process that I have seen in jury selection in my entire 16 years career as a prosecutor and now as a defense attorney.
Vic, does the high-profile nature help one side or the other?
I don't think so. I think once you're inside that the four walls of the courtroom, the jury is ordered to only consider what it is that they are presented with. And you're absolutely right in pointing out the jury questionnaire goes through a number of things in our history and those people's history in the potential jury. For instance, have you had any interaction with law enforcement? Have any family members or loved ones had any experience? How do you feel about Black Lives Matter? How do you feel about Blue Lives Matter? These are very, let's say, intrusive questions that require an individual to reveal their personal preferences. Now, let's be realistic. In Law School 101, we believe everybody should tell the truth, but that's not the way it is in the real world. And I know that many people like myself who've tried a number of high-profile cases in front of a jury have been absolutely floored when we talk to the jury afterwards, both good and bad. We just cannot make a decision on what is inside the minds and souls of those people, especially based on the color of their skin. And this is a big issue we see in jury selection, because here it's the prosecutor uniquely and markedly unique in that position, pointing out that the defense is trying to kick off individuals who in two cases were of Hispanic heritage. This is what's called a Batson challenge. Usually we see defense raising this argument against prosecutors or state or federal actors trying to sway the jury with one racial makeup or another. So are you going to get the truth? I don't believe you ever will. Questionnaire, talking to someone for 5 hours with truth serum still wouldn't give them the truth. The decision is what's going to matter, and that's going to be 12 people plus the alternates really fighting it out. I can tell you this deliberation is going to be extraordinarily emotional and tough.
Yeah. All right, both of you, thank you for your time. Vic Bajaj out of San Diego and Bernarda Villalona from New York City, thank you for your expertise. We're going to step aside, take a break. When we come back, it is the Daily Sidebar. Stay with us.